to be quick to leave time for more discussion at the end. And what I'm basically going to present now, it's a little bit of a wider picture of our group's research activities on urban design and air quality. So basically, the first question is to why, and the first answer is because urban planning decisions affect environmental outcomes for years to come. The roads that we're still using here were laid out several years ago, and that does put some constraints on what you can do and what you can achieve. But also, and this is a figure from a paper from 2011 that actually shows this long-term impact of the design of the cities. But depending on the shape of the urban areas and the accessibility to public transport and the feasibility of public transport, it does determine, to a degree, the air quality outcomes that can be achieved in these areas. Now, as I said, I'm going to show you here a little bit of our research program, which is funded through our core funds in NIWA, which means just that we have a long-term platform to do this kind of research and allow us to focus on questions that don't necessarily have a one-year answer. Like, how does the pollution, as Ulrich mentioned, that's emitted in one place ends up as a concentration measured somewhere else and determines the exposure of people, and why and how is that exposure varying between individuals. Now, in urban areas, there it is, urban areas are very diverse, and depending on where you are is what you're experiencing, but also depending on who you are is what you're experiencing. And in terms of air quality and exposure to air pollutants, it's documented differences. This is a sample plot of a couple of runs that we made, where we put some air quality sensors on people, not quite a parent and a child, but the researcher simulated being a parent and simulated being a child. And the black curve is the exposure experienced by the adult, whereas the red one is experienced by the child. And you'll see that they're different first, and they peak at different times, they go to different places, and as I said, in terms of air quality, they experience the city differently. Now that puts a challenge to us as air quality researchers, in that we need high spatial and temporal resolution measurements to actually understand that difference in exposure and characterize the different microenvironments in a city. As Ulrich mentioned, the resolution of your modeling approach and measurements here, it's key to actually observe what you want to observe in terms of assessing the problem, but also evaluating whether what you're doing is actually making any difference at all. And this is from a project that we named Roadside. We weren't being very original then. Where we measured a number of things next to a highway, and our goal was to understand and characterize the impact of these significantly trafficked roads on the exposure of people living right next to it. The application of these results actually end up in this thing. One is from NZTA, New Zealand Transport Agency website, where a model that stems from that kind of work is being used as a roadside assessment or a screening tool, whether the NZTA will pursue or not expanding a road or building a new road. But it can also be used, and it has been used, to develop or to assist in the development of land use rules. That's the map on the right. Yeah, that's the right one. That shows early childhood education centers and elderly care centers located near major roads. And that's the link that we were trying to bridge, the impact of these major roads on the sensitive receptors. Now, unfortunately, that approach didn't quite work on the heavily built areas, the CBD, I mean, more of the high-rise, very dense built areas. It just didn't work. We didn't plan that campaign to do that. So we planned a different campaign, and this one we're being more adventurous with the names. One's called PNAD, that stands for pollution, people exposure to pollution and noise, something like that. And Spartans, that's cooler. And it's a much longer name that I just can't remember now, which is the goal of the acronyms, that you remember that one. But this was basically both projects aimed at measuring with a distributed network of air pollution sensors with very dense network in the Auckland CBD, both nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter. This is from nitrogen dioxide and this is from particulate matter, and it's a picture of the sensors that we deployed, and correlate those measurements with other parameters like land use, like traffic flows, like building height, like footpath clearance, with the main goal of actually transforming and converting this data into information that can be actioned on. So taking transport data, traffic, public transport and bus movement data, traditional air quality monitoring data, that in the case of the Auckland CBD, there's actually an Auckland Council air quality monitor down there, meteorology, etc., to convert this and understand why the levels are those observed and what can we do about it. And this is where the TOTUS that Philippa mentioned comes in. And this acronym, again with acronyms, well, I came up with that several years ago, and I still get flack about it. It's a liberal choice of letters, but I think it works. It started as a towards sustainable urban forms, as a project focusing on quantifying the impact of the urban form on air quality outcomes. And the word totus in Latin means all-encompassing, primarily because in urban areas we have all sorts of layers and parameters and activities that control the outcomes that we want to achieve. So we set out in a very ambitious way to develop a modeling and database framework that's able to incorporate and integrate different information layers and model systems to enable comparisons of the kind of what would be the exposure of someone living here and wanting to work as a accountant, just to mention something, on two given scenarios. What if we put a shopping center here with lots of work areas and therefore an accounting firm here, or we put it somewhere else? So it's our aim to move from characterizing and evaluating the personal exposure of the population moving through an air pollution field in an urban area. Now we've used that, and it's actually available for anybody to have a look at. But the kinds of questions we've used it so far, if you focus on this upper right corner there, that's school travel patterns. That's a bunch of schools in Auckland where we have data from where people live and what do they use to go to school. And we use the total system to generate estimates of how much traffic the kids are exposed to when going to school. And the color of those bubbles represent, the red colors represent a lot of traffic in going from home to school, and the green colors represent very little traffic. The size of the bubbles represent the average trip that the students take to go from home to school. So this enables us to identify some schools that have a very large have a very small footprint and their students are exposed to very little traffic. that in itself is just data, but that's data and information that wasn't there before because we didn't have that platform to enable that, thank you, to enable that comparison and that analysis. And now if we move to the bottom panel here, this is a more contingent or interesting exercise. The map here is the impact of the earthquake in Christchurch on the traffic flow. Well, that's not quite true. It's the impact of the earthquake on the traffic flow as observed or as estimated in the long-term nitrogen dioxide concentration field. So areas here in the CBD or downtown Christchurch where no traffic, no car were traveling after the earthquake, so improvement on a reduction on the NO2 concentrations, where some areas in the outskirts here saw an increase. Now in terms of population, that can be summarized as a few people got a better air quality after the earthquake, and a lot of people got it worse. And that kind of assessment, that kind of information, we believe is useful for urban planners and for policymakers, so that the policies are informed by science. Now this figure here shows our demo website that everybody's welcome. I'm going to give you the address in a minute. To have a try on. It's on purpose. It's very light on documentation because we are seeking feedback from anyone and everyone on what kind of information might be useful to have there, what information, what mechanics, how can you use a system like that, and any feedback is very much welcome. So what now? As Philippa mentioned, we are working hard in developing the total system within the Resilient Urban Futures program, and our main focus at the moment is on usability and relevance. So the goal is to, and that's why the questions I asked before, what would the system work best or better for you, and what kind of information would be more relevant. So what kind of other layers we could add to that system now that anybody here may have an interest around, like planning scenarios, demographic changes, or energy policy. And on that energy policy, because of our flexibility, and let me go back here, we do have in the total system an energy consumption module that enables us to estimate the energy consumption for different urban forms and urban land uses. So as I promised, here is the website that everybody's welcome to click on or just write down on. And I think I did very good on time.